The stars never changed at monitor station Kepler 7. They hung in the void, like distant witnesses, cold and impartial. Kira had stared at those same stars for 35 years, watching and waiting, guarding the invisible wall that separated humanity from the rest of the galaxy. The year was 2347. She was 58 years old, and she was tired. Not the physical exhaustion that came with long shifts or sleepless nights. No, this was deeper. The kind of tired that settled into your bones when you spent half a lifetime watching a prison door that nobody ever tried to open. Until today. Kira stood in the command center of Kepler 7, her fingers moving across the holographic display with practiced efficiency. The station hummed around her, a soft, constant reminder of the technology that kept them alive in the darkness. Through the massive viewing screen ahead, the quarantine boundary stretched across space like an invisible scar. Beyond it, somewhere in the distant darkness, was Sol, Earth, humanity. 50 years ago, the Galactic Empire had placed a barrier around the entire human star system. No ships could enter, none could leave. The decision had been unanimous among the council. Humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too primitive. Their fusion drives spewed radiation like open wounds. Their ships barely held together. They fought each other with a savagery that disturbed even the most militant species. The quarantine was meant to be temporary. Let them mature or let them destroy themselves trying. Either way, the problem would solve itself. Kira had voted in favor of the containment protocol. She remembered that day. Clearly, the council chamber, the debate, the final decision. She had been 28 years old, barely out of the academy, already carrying the weight of grief that would define the rest of her life. 2 years earlier, her brother Aldrich had died in her arms. The memory came unbidden the way trauma always does. The emergency beacon. The desperate scramble to the colony at Veridian 3. The Vraken attack ships, tearing through the settlement's defenses like paper. She had arrived in time to pull survivors from the wreckage. Aldrich had been among them, barely alive, his chest torn open by weapons fire, blood pooling beneath him. His last words echoed across 52 years. Not all of them are monsters, Kira. Some are just different. She had held him as he died, feeling his heartbeat slow and then stop. 25 years old, he'd wanted to be a teacher. Instead, he became a statistic, another victim of alien aggression, another reason to be afraid of what lurked beyond the safety of Imperial space. The Vraken were eventually defeated, pushed back into their own territory, contained like the humans would be 2 years later. But Aldrich was still dead. And Kira had learned a simple truth: when you don't understand something, when it frightens you, you build walls around it. The quarantine had been her wall. Admiral Thornwald, Kira blinked, pulling herself back to the present. Lieutenant Gavin Locke stood at his station, his young face creased with concern. 29 years old, bright, eager. He reminded her of Aldrich sometimes, which made her both protective and distant. "What is it, Lieutenant?" "I'm getting something strange on the long-range sensors." Gavin's fingers moved across his console, pulling up data that made no sense. "Massive energy reading, ma'am, coming through hyperspace from the direction of Sol." Kira's blood went cold. She crossed to his station in 3 quick strides, her eyes scanning the display. The energy signature was enormous, bigger than their largest battleships. The pattern was chaotic, inefficient, wasteful, nothing like the clean, elegant signatures of Imperial technology. But there was something familiar about it, something that tugged at memories from 50 years ago. "Show me the spectral analysis," she said quietly. Gavin complied. The screen filled with data. Kira studied it for a long moment, her pen racing through decades of archived intelligence reports. Then she saw it, the distinctive pattern of fusion reactions. Deuterium-tritium burning at extreme temperatures. The same crude brute force approach to power generation that humanity had been using when they were first discovered. But this was different, magnified, refined in ways that shouldn't be possible with primitive technology. "Where did it originate?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The computer traced the hyperspace trajectory backward. Gavin's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly over the controls. From inside the quarantine zone, from Sol system itself, the command center fell silent. Every officer turned to look at the main display where the energy signature grew stronger with each passing second. For 50 years, nothing had emerged from human space. The monitoring stations reported the same information month after month, year after year. Humanity was still there, still alive, still contained. Their technology had improved marginally, better life support, more efficient fusion reactors, the beginning of asteroid mining, but nothing that suggested they could break the barrier or had any desire to try. The Empire had gradually stopped paying attention. The monitoring was reduced. Resources were allocated elsewhere. Humanity became a footnote in galactic history, a cautionary tale about species that couldn't be trusted with the stars. And now, something was coming out. Kira activated the emergency communication system. Within seconds, she was connected to the High Council on the capital world of Zephyr Prime. The holographic images of 6 counselors materialized around her alien faces, of various shapes and sizes, all bearing expressions of concern as they read the alert that had interrupted their session. Grand Counselor Wren spoke first. Their voice was calm, measured, the product of 3 centuries of diplomatic experience. Admiral Thornwald explained the emergency. Kira chose her words carefully. We have an unknown contact approaching from the quarantine zone. Energy signature is massive and appears to be of human origin. Their technology profile matches their primitive fusion systems, but the power output is far beyond what they should be capable of. Counselor Teth leaned forward, his scaled features hardening. As the Empire's military commander, he saw threats everywhere. Are you suggesting the humans have broken containment? I can't rule it out, sir. The energy patterns are consistent with their technology from 50 years ago, but significantly more advanced. Impossible, Teth said flatly. We've monitored that system for 5 decades. Their development has been minimal. They're still contained within their own solar system. With respect, Counselor, Kira said, when was the last time we conducted a comprehensive scan of human space? The silence that followed was answer enough. The Empire had assumed the problem was solved. The door was locked. The threat was contained. Why waste resources watching a species that had nowhere to go? Counselor Wren's expression remained neutral, but Kira caught the flash of concern in their ancient eyes. How long until the contact reaches our territory? Kira checked her display. At current velocity, approximately 6 hours. 6 hours! Teth's voice rose in alarm. That's faster than our best ships. Yes, sir. Significantly faster. Another silence. For 3,000 years, no species had challenged the Empire's technological superiority. Their vessels were the fastest, their weapons the most powerful, their defenses impenetrable. The idea that some unknown ship, especially one built by humans, could outrun their fleet was deeply disturbing. Grand Counselor Wren made the decision quickly. Admiral Thornwald, you will personally intercept this contact at the Kepler defense perimeter. If it is indeed of human origin, establish communication. Determine their intentions. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Understood, Counselor? And Admiral Wren's voice carried a weight that transcended the hologram. We placed humanity under quarantine because we feared what they might become. If they've spent 50 years preparing for this moment, we need to know what they've become. The transmission ended. Kira stood alone in the command center, staring at the energy signature that grew steadily closer on her display. Around her, officers moved with renewed urgency, preparing the station's defenses, running diagnostic checks on weapon systems that hadn't been fired in anger for decades. Gavin approached her station. Admiral, should we scramble the defense wings? Kira considered the question. 6 fighter squadrons waited in the station's launch bays, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Standard protocol called for a show of force when dealing with potential threats, but something made her hesitate. No, she said finally. We watch, we wait, we learn. Ma'am, if they're hostile, then we'll know soon enough, Lieutenant. She turned to face him and he saw something in her expression that made him step back. Not fear, not quite, but uncertainty, and that was more frightening than any threat. 50 years ago, I helped lock that door. I told myself it was for the good of the galaxy, for peace, for safety. Now someone's knocking, and I need to know if we locked the right thing inside. The hours crawled past. Kira remained at her post watching the sensors, refusing the coffee that Gavin brought her, ignoring the fatigue that pulled at her shoulders. The energy signature grew stronger, closer, more defined. At the 5-hour mark, the sensors finally resolved enough detail to provide basic structural data. What they showed made no sense. The vessel was enormous, 3 times the size of an Imperial dreadnought, but its construction was crude, almost primitive. Thick plates of metal welded together in rough seams. Exposed power conduits running along the hull like scars. Weapon systems mounted at odd angles as if someone had simply bolted them wherever they would fit. It looked less like a starship and more like a flying piece of industrial equipment. Ugly, inelegant, wrong. But the power readings were off the charts. "What in the void is that thing?" Gavin whispered. Kira didn't answer. She was studying the ship's profile, comparing it to archived images from 50 years ago. The construction methods were similar, the same brute force approach to engineering, the same disregard for aesthetic design. But the scale was different, the power was different, everything was different, yet somehow the same. It was as if someone had taken humanity's crude, primitive technology and simply made it bigger, more powerful, more dangerous without ever making it elegant. At the 6-hour mark, the vessel dropped out of hyperspace. It appeared on visual sensors like a metal mountain suddenly materializing in the void. Dark grey hull plates, scarred and pitted from what looked like decades of use. The ship's name was painted across the bow in white letters, 3 stories tall, UHSF Defiant, United Human Space Force. Kira felt something shift in her chest. Not quite fear, not quite anticipation. Something else. The feeling you get when you realize the world is about to change and there's nothing you can do to stop it. "Open all communication channels," she ordered. Static filled the command center. Then cutting through the interference came a voice. It spoke in Galactic standard, the common tongue of the Empire, but the accent was rough, the grammar imperfect. A human voice speaking a language they shouldn't know. "Monitor station Kepler 7, this is UHSF Defiant. We request permission to pass through Imperial space for diplomatic purposes. Please respond." Kira activated her own communication system. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil she felt inside. "Unknown vessel Defiant, you are entering restricted Imperial space. Identify yourself properly and state your intentions." The response came immediately, as if they'd been expecting the question. "This is Captain Arya Bridger of the United Human Space Force vessel Defiant. We represent 47 human colony systems. We request safe passage to Nexus Prime to open diplomatic relations with the Galactic Empire. 47 colonies." The words hung in the air like a confession. Kira felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. 47. Not one system, not 2. 47 separate colonies, each representing thousands or millions of people scattered across a space that was supposed to be empty. "Captain Bridger," Kira said carefully, "your people were placed under quarantine 50 years ago. How did you establish colonies outside your home system?" A sound came through the speaker. It took Kira a moment to recognize it. Laughter. The human captain was actually laughing. "Admiral, and I assume I'm speaking to the Admiral we never considered ourselves contained. We just decided to be patient for a while. 50 years seemed like enough time. Patient." They had been patient. While the Empire relaxed, assuming the problem was solved, humanity had been preparing, planning, building. For 50 years, they had worked in silence and nobody had noticed. "Stand by, Captain Bridger," Kira said. "Do not move your vessel while we contact our superiors." "We'll wait, Admiral, but you should know." The captain's voice carried a hint of something. Warning, amusement. "We're not the only ship out here." Before Kira could ask what that meant, Gavin shouted an alarm. "Admiral, multiple contacts, ships dropping out of hyperspace." The display erupted with new signatures. 5 more vessels appeared around the Defiant, each one as large and crude looking as the first. They moved into formation, with practiced precision, surrounding their leader like a pack of metal wolves. 6 ships. 6 massive, ugly, powerful ships that shouldn't exist. Kira's hands gripped the edge of her console. She forced herself to breathe, to think, to process what she was seeing. The Empire had spent 50 years believing they had contained humanity, believing the threat was managed, believing they could ignore the problem until it went away. They had been wrong. Through the viewport, the Defiant hung in space like a monument to everything the Empire had failed to understand. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't beautiful, but it was real. It was here, and it was just the beginning. Kira opened an emergency channel to the High Council. The holographic faces appeared instantly, their expressions already showing alarm as they received the sensor data from Kepler-7. Admiral Thornwald, Grand Councilor Wren said quietly, "Report." Kira took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but inside she felt the foundations of everything she believed beginning to crack. The vessels are confirmed human in origin. 6 ships total, all heavily armed. Their leader, Captain Arya Bridger, is requesting diplomatic passage to Nexus Prime. She claims to represent 47 human colony systems. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Councillor Teth's face darkened. 47 systems. Our intelligence indicated they were still confined to Sol. Our intelligence was wrong, sir. Kira pulled up the data Gavin had compiled. The ships show signs of advanced fusion technology, crude construction methods, but exceptional power output. They're using brute force to achieve what we accomplished through refined engineering. It shouldn't work, but it does. Wren leaned forward. What is your assessment of their capabilities, Admiral? Kira hesitated. The honest answer was terrifying. These ships could tear through the Kepler defense perimeter like it was made of paper. Their weapons were numerous, if inelegant. Their armor was thick enough to shrug off standard Imperial weaponry. And if they had 6 ships here, how many more did they have elsewhere? Sir, she said finally, if they wanted to attack, they already would have. The fact that they're requesting permission suggests they want to talk, not fight. Or they're stalling while reinforcements arrive, Teth growled. Either way, we need to know what we're dealing with. Wren's voice carried the weight of millennia of Imperial history. Grant them safe passage, Admiral. Escort them to Nexus Prime. But keep your weapons ready. If humanity has changed in 50 years, we need to understand how and why. The transmission ended. Kira stood alone with the weight of the decision, staring at the 6 ships that represented everything unknown and potentially terrifying about a species the Empire had tried to ignore. She opened the channel to the Defiant. Captain Bridger, you are granted safe passage to Nexus Prime for diplomatic discussions. You will proceed under escort. Any deviation from the designated route will be considered an act of hostility. Understood, Admiral. We appreciate the hospitality. There was a pause then. And Admiral, thank you for choosing to talk first. It says good things about your empire. The transmission ended before Kira could respond. The 6 human ships began moving their massive forms, accelerating with surprising grace, despite their ugly construction. Kira ordered 3 Imperial escort vessels to join them, maintaining a respectful distance, but keeping weapon systems primed. As the convoy began its journey toward the heart of Imperial space, Kira found herself thinking about Aldrich, about his last words, about the question he'd asked that she'd never been able to answer. Not all of them are monsters. Some are just different. She had spent 50 years trying to protect the galaxy from humanity, from the violent, unpredictable species that frightened her because they reminded her of the Vraken of loss of pain. But what if she'd been wrong? What if the quarantine hadn't been protection, but prison? And what if the prisoners had spent 50 years becoming something the Empire had never anticipated? She would have her answer soon. In 36 hours, the convoy would reach Nexus Prime, the diplomatic station where the Empire conducted all its most important negotiations, where the fate of species was decided, where the future would be written. Kira watched the human ships disappear into hyperspace, following the safe corridor her station had provided. Then she turned to Gavin, who stood at his post with wide eyes and trembling hands. Lieutenant, pull up all archived intelligence on human space. Every scan, every report, every analysis for the past 50 years. I want to know everything we missed. Oh, yes, ma'am. He hesitated. Admiral, do you think they're dangerous? Kira looked at the empty space where the ships had been. She thought about the massive vessels, crude but powerful. About Captain Bridger's calm voice, confident without being arrogant. About 47 colonies that shouldn't exist. About 50 years of silence that had hidden a revolution. I don't know, Lieutenant, she said quietly, but I think we're about to find out if we were protecting the galaxy from them or if we were protecting them from us. She left the command center and walked to her private quarters. The door slid shut behind her, sealing her in the silence she'd lived with for 35 years. On her desk sat a holographic display, a single frozen moment from 52 years ago. Aldrich, young and smiling, standing in front of his first classroom, radiating the hope and pride of someone who believed he could shape young minds. She'd kept the image all these years as a reminder, a warning, a reason to be vigilant against alien threats. Now staring at her brother's face, she wondered if she'd learned the wrong lesson, if she'd let fear become policies, if she'd built walls when she should have built bridges. The Defiant was out there now carrying humans toward the heart of the Empire, humans who had spent 50 years doing something in silence, building something, becoming something. And Kira Thornwald, who had voted to lock them away, would have to face what they'd become. She touched the hologram gently, Aldrich's smile flickering under her fingertips. I hope I made the right choice, she whispered. I hope they're here to talk. Because if they're not... She didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. The sensor logs told the story clearly enough. 6 ships, 47 colonies, 50 years of preparation. Whatever humanity had become, the galaxy was about to meet them. And nothing would ever be the same. Outside her window, the stars watched in silence. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had witnessed species evolve and go extinct. They had watched as humanity climbed from their cradle world to spread among the cosmos. And now, those same stars would witness what happened when fear met patience, when containment met determination, when an empire built on elegance faced a civilization built on raw, stubborn survival. 36 hours to Nexus Prime. 36 hours until the galaxy learned whether the quarantine had been protection or mistake. 36 hours until Kira Thornwald discovered if her brother had been right all along. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. Commander Thane Carver had been a scout for 18 years. He'd mapped uncharted nebulae, catalogued dying stars, and once spent 3 months hiding in the rings of a gas giant while a hostile fleet passed overhead. He was trained to observe without being seen, to record without being noticed, to survive where others would die. But nothing in his training had prepared him for what he was seeing now. His stealth ship, the Whisper, hung motionless in the outer reaches of the Sol system. Its advanced cloaking field bent light and sensor waves around the hull, making it effectively invisible to any known detection method. He'd slipped past the quarantine boundary 6 hours ago, following Admiral Thornwald's orders to conduct a comprehensive reconnaissance of human space. Find out what they've been doing for 50 years. Find out how they built those ships. Thane was finding out, and he wished he wasn't. The space around Earth was transformed. Where intelligence reports from 50 years ago showed a handful of orbital stations and experimental habitats, there now existed a massive industrial complex that defied comprehension. Enormous metal frameworks floated in synchronized orbits, each one the size of a small moon. They weren't stations, they were shipyards, 30 of them, 30 massive construction facilities, each one building multiple vessels simultaneously. Thane adjusted his sensors, zooming in on the nearest yard. Through the skeletal framework, he could see ships in various stages of completion. Some were just beginning, basic frames being welded together by what looked like thousands of robotic arms and human workers in pressure suits. Others were nearly finished, their ugly scarred hulls reflecting Earth's blue light as final systems were installed and tested. All of them shared the same brutal aesthetic as the Defiant. Thick armor plates, exposed conduits, weapons mounted with more concern for function than form. They looked like they'd been assembled by people who cared much more about whether something worked than whether it looked good doing it. But they were clearly functional, very functional. Payne recorded everything, his instruments cataloging, hull thicknesses, power signatures, weapon placements. The data was disturbing. These weren't exploration vessels or cargo haulers pretending to be warships. These were purpose-built military craft designed from the keel up for combat. He expanded his scan range, sweeping across the inner solar system. Mars showed similar construction orbital yards and surface facilities that glowed with industrial heat. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was filled with mining operations, thousands of robotic harvesters stripping metals from ancient rocks. The moons of Jupiter hosted more shipyards, more factories, more of everything. Every available resource in the system had been turned toward a single purpose: building ships. His communication intercept system picked up radio chatter from the planet below. His translation software worked quickly, converting human languages into Galactic standard. Most of it then was mundane scheduling resource allocation shift changes. But then he caught something that made his blood freeze. Shipyard 7 reports Hull 847 ready for engine installation. Copy that. Mining Station Series confirms delivery of raw materials to Luna Foundry. Colony Ship Group Delta has launched for Tau Ceti system. Estimated arrival in 47 days. Colony ships to Tau Ceti, which was outside the quarantine zone, far outside. Thane pulled up his star charts, hands moving with methodical precision despite his racing pulse. He began scanning for energy signatures in nearby star systems, dreading what he might find. Tau Ceti human fusion signatures detected. Industrial development in progress. Proxima Centauri. Multiple orbital platforms. Surface settlements on Proxima b. Epsilon Eridani. Advanced infrastructure. Shipyard construction detected. System after system showed the same pattern. Human expansion. Human industry. Human ships being built in places that were supposed to be empty. He counted carefully. 10 systems. 20. 30. The numbers kept climbing. 47 confirmed the human colonies. Admiral Thornwald had been right. Captain Bridger hadn't been exaggerating. Humanity had shattered their containment decades ago, spreading through space methodically and establishing footholds on worlds the Empire had deemed uninhabitable or uninteresting. And they'd done it all in silence, while the Empire looked the other way. Thane activated his emergency communication system, broadcasting an encrypted signal back to Kepler-7. The distance was vast, but the message was compressed and prioritized for immediate delivery. Command, this is Scout 7. Quarantine has been ineffective for at least 30 years. Human industrial capacity exceeds initial estimates by a factor of 50. They have established permanent colonies in 47 confirmed star systems, possibly more. Shipyard construction is occurring simultaneously in multiple locations. Conservative fleet estimate several hundred vessels, possibly over 1,000. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment. Carver out. He sat back in his command chair, processing the magnitude of what he'd discovered. This wasn't just a military buildup. This was proof that humanity had spent 50 years outthinking the Empire while appearing docile. Each colony was self-sufficient. Each system had its own shipyards. They had built redundancy into every aspect of their civilization. The Empire had 3,000 ships, total spread across the entire galaxy. Humanity confined to one small region of space might have a third of that number already. And they were still building. This wasn't first contact. This was the revelation of a rival power that had grown in the Empire's shadow unnoticed and unchallenged until it was strong enough to demand recognition. Thane set course for Imperial space, his stealth ship slipping away from Sol as quietly as it had arrived. Behind him, the forges of Sol continued their work. Welders flashed in the darkness. Hulls grew plate by plate, and nobody was watching anymore. The report reached Kira Thornwald 18 hours later. She read it 3 times each pass, revealing new layers of strategic deception. Humanity hadn't just broken quarantine, they turned it into the galaxy's greatest intelligence failure. She forwarded Thane's data to Grand Counselor Wren with a single note. They've been 3 steps ahead of us for 30 years. We're about to find out what Step 4 looks like. Step 4 was approaching Nexus Prime at that very moment. 36 hours after departing Kepler-7, the convoy dropped out of hyperspace at Nexus Prime. The diplomatic station hung in space like a crystal sculpture, its transparent walls and elegant curves representing the finest of imperial architecture. It had hosted peace negotiations for over 1,000 years, witnessed the birth of alliances and the end of wars. The station was neutral ground, protected by treaty and tradition, where even enemies could meet without fear. Today, it would host the most important meeting in galactic history. Admiral Kira Thornwald stood in the station's observation deck, watching as the 6 human ships took up positions around Nexus Prime. They moved with surprising coordination, maintaining precise distances despite their crude appearance, like wolves circling prey or guards protecting something precious. She wasn't sure which interpretation was correct. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Behind her, the main conference chamber was being prepared. Representatives from dozens of species were arriving, council members, military advisors, diplomats. Everyone wanted to witness this moment. Everyone wanted to understand what humanity had become. Kira checked her reflection in the polished viewport. 58 years lurked back at her, gray threading through dark hair, lines around her eyes from decades of squinting at star charts. The uniform of an admiral who'd spent most of her career watching a door that never opened. Until it did. Admiral Thornwald. She turned. A young aide stood at attention, humanoid, but clearly not human, subtle differences in bone structure and skin tone marking him as one of the Empire's many species. Captain Bridger has docked. She's requesting permission to enter the conference chamber. Granted. Standard diplomatic escort. No weapons, but don't make it obvious we're checking. The aide nodded and departed. Kira took a breath, steadying herself. In a few minutes, she would meet the human who'd spent 50 years planning this moment. The woman who commanded a ship that shouldn't exist, representing colonies that shouldn't be there. The woman who might hold the future of the galaxy in her hands. Kira made her way to the conference chamber. The space was vast, designed to accommodate the physical diversity of galactic civilization. A circular table dominated the center, surrounded by seats adapted for various body types. The walls were transparent, offering views of the stars beyond. It was meant to be awe-inspiring, a reminder that they were all small beings negotiating in the vastness of space. Today it just felt cold. The chamber was already filling with delegates. Kira recognized most of them. Counselor Teth, the military commander, his reptilian features set in permanent suspicion. Various species representatives all chattering nervously. And at the head of the table, Grand Counselor Wren, their ancient eyes taking in everything with patient wisdom. Then the doors opened and Captain Arya Bridger walked in. She was smaller than Kira expected, maybe 5.5 feet tall. Compact build, moving with the economical grace of someone who'd spent years in variable gravity. She wore a simple military uniform, dark blue, with minimal decoration. Her hair was pulled back in a practical style. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing to soften or enhance. She looked like exactly what she was, a career officer who'd spent decades doing a difficult job. But it was her eyes that caught Kira's attention. Dark brown, alert, taking in the entire chamber in a single sweep. Assessing, calculating, not afraid but not arrogant either, just aware. 3 other humans followed her, 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing the same simple uniforms, all carrying themselves with the same quiet confidence. The chamber fell silent as they took their seats across from the Imperial delegation. The contrast was striking. On one side, flowing robes and elegant dress uniforms representing 3,000 years of refined civilization. On the other, plain military fatigues that looked like they'd been designed for function over fashion. Grand Counselor Rain spoke first, their voice filling the chamber with gentle authority. Captain Bridger, welcome to Nexus Prime. You have requested diplomatic recognition for your people. The Galactic Empire is prepared to listen. Arya Bridger stood. When she spoke, her voice was clear, unaccented by nerves or hesitation. Grand Counselor, members of the Council, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I represent the United Human Space Force and the 47 independent colony systems established by humanity over the past 50 years. We are here to formally request recognition as a sovereign power within galactic civilization. Counselor Teth leaned forward, his scaled features hardening. Your people were placed under quarantine 50 years ago for the protection of galactic stability. How do you justify breaking that containment? Arya met his gaze without flinching. With respect, Counselor, we never agreed to be prisoners. Your empire made that decision without our input or consent. We don't recognize the legitimacy of unilateral containment. Your species was deemed too dangerous for unrestricted contact. Teth shot back. Your tendency toward violence and unpredictable behavior posed a threat to galactic peace. And yet, Arya said with a slight smile, here we are, requesting diplomatic talks instead of opening fire on your defense perimeter. We could have entered your space with force. We chose dialogue. That seems like the opposite of unpredictable violence. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Kira found herself suppressing a smile. The captain had a point. Arya activated a small device and a holographic star map appeared above the table. The galaxy spread out before them in miniature colored regions marking different territories and zones. This is how we see the current situation. The red sections covered roughly 60% of the map Imperial territory. Blue areas marked other major powers and their allies. Yellow indicated neutral zones and unexplored regions. And scattered throughout like green sparks against the darkness were 47 marked systems. These are human colonies, Arya said, all established in areas your empire classified as uninhabitable or uninteresting. We didn't take anything you wanted, but took what you couldn't use. Counselor Teth's eyes widened. 47 systems, our intelligence indicated 30 at most. Your intelligence needs better funding, Arya said bluntly. We've been expanding for decades while you watched our home system and assumed that was all there was. Kira watched Ren's expression. The Grand Counselor showed no surprise, but there was something else there. Respect maybe, or recognition that they were dealing with an opponent who'd outmaneuvered them completely. What do you want from us? Ren asked quietly. Recognition, Arya replied. We want the Empire to acknowledge our right to exist as an independent power. We want trade agreements, diplomatic relations, and clear boundaries so we don't accidentally step on each other's toes. And if we refuse, Teth challenged. Arya's expression didn't change. Then, we continue doing exactly what we've been doing, except we stop being polite about it. Are you threatening us? I'm stating facts, Counselor. Arya gestured to the star map again. We've been studying your empire for 50 years. We know your military capabilities, your trade routes, your political structures, and your technological limitations. We've designed our ships and tactics specifically to counter your advantages. She expanded a section of the map showing tactical analyses that made Kira's blood run cold. Detailed assessments of Imperial fleet compositions, identified weaknesses in standard defense formations, alternative hyperspace routes that bypassed major checkpoints. Your fleet relies on centralized command and established supply lines. Arya continued. Our ships are designed to operate independently for months without resupply. Your weapons are energy-based and require precise targeting. Our weapons are kinetic projectiles that work even in heavy interference. Your ships prioritize speed and maneuverability. Ours prioritize armor and firepower. The chamber was dead silent. Every delegate stared at the tactical data, understanding its implications. Humanity hadn't just built ships, they'd built them specifically to fight the Empire. Admiral Kira found herself speaking before she realized it. Are you saying you could defeat our fleet? Arya turned to face her directly. Their eyes met across the table. I'm saying we could make it very expensive for you to try to stop us, Admiral. But that's not what we want. War is wasteful. It destroys resources and kills people who could be building something better. We'd much rather be partners. What could humans possibly offer the Empire? Councillor Teth asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Arya smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. You might be surprised, Councillor. Your technology is elegant and efficient, but it's also fragile and expensive. Ours is crude, but it's tough and cheap to build. There are places in the galaxy where your ships can't go, things your people can't do. She activated the hologram again, showing images of human colonies. Kira leaned forward, studying them carefully. Cities built inside massive domes on airless moons, underground complexes on worlds with crushing gravity, floating platforms in the atmospheres of gas giants, settlements on planets with temperatures that would kill most galactic species within minutes. We've established permanent habitats on worlds with deadly atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and lethal radiation levels, Arya explained. Places your people would never consider living. We can go where you can't, mine resources you can't reach, build things in conditions that would shut down your factories. She paused, letting the images speak for themselves. Children playing in pressurized domes, with hellish landscapes visible through transparent walls. Workers in heavy suits, extracting minerals from asteroid surfaces. Scientists conducting research in environments that would be instant death without protection. In return, Arya continued, you have technologies that could help us. Medical advances, agricultural techniques, educational systems, things that would improve lives for billions of humans. We're proposing a trade. We handle the difficult and dangerous work. You provide the knowledge and infrastructure we need to build better societies. Grand Councillor Wren studied the images thoughtfully. And if we agree to recognize your independence, you would cease unauthorized expansion. We would coordinate our expansion with imperial authorities to avoid conflicts, Arya said carefully. But we won't stop growing. That's not who we are. Humanity expands. It's what we do. We're explorers, builders, survivors. You can work with that tendency, or you can fight against it, but you can't stop it. Before anyone could respond, a soft alarm chimed through the station. An aide approached Councillor Wren, whispering urgently. The Grand Councillor's expression darkened. What is it? Kira asked, though she already felt dread building in her chest. Wren looked up, their ancient eyes troubled. More human ships have appeared at 17 different checkpoints throughout Imperial space, all of them requesting permission for diplomatic passage. Arya nodded as if she'd expected this. My people wanted to make sure you understood the scope of what you're dealing with. Those ships represent different colony groups, each with their own interests and capabilities. How many ships total? Teth demanded. Currently en route to Imperial space, about 50. Arya's voice remained calm. Total fleet size, I honestly don't know, Councillor. We've been building for 50 years and each colony operates semi-independently. Could be hundreds, could be thousands. We lost count. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Kira felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Thousands. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. The Empire's entire military force numbered in the hundreds. If humanity had built comparable numbers using their crude but effective technology, the balance of power in the galaxy had fundamentally shifted, and nobody had noticed until it was too late. The choice is yours, Arya said quietly, cutting through the noise. We can be friends or we can be a very expensive problem. But either way, we're not going away. We're not going back into quarantine. We're not going to pretend we don't exist. Humanity is part of galactic civilization now, whether you like it or not. The only question is whether we work together or waste resources fighting each other. Grand Councillor Wren stood slowly, their ancient form unfolding with dignity. The council will need time to consider your proposal. Of course, Arya replied, but don't take too long. My people have been patient for 50 years. That patience has limits. The session ended. Delegates filed out, their conversations urgent and worried. Kira remained seated, staring at the holographic map that still floated above the table. 47 green dots scattered across his space, 50 ships approaching, thousands more potentially waiting. A civilization built in silence, a power that emerged from containment stronger than anyone imagined. She'd helped lock the door 50 years ago. Now she had to live with what had grown behind it. The council debated for 6 hours in private session. Kira wasn't invited. She spent the time in her assigned quarters reviewing Thane Carver's reconnaissance report. The images and data he'd collected painted a picture of systematic, methodical expansion. Humanity hadn't exploded outward in chaotic expansion. They'd planned, prepared, built infrastructure before sending colonists, established supply lines before building fleets. It was the work of a species that had learned patience the hard way. Kira was studying the tactical analysis of human ship design when her communication console chimed. Emergency priority. She answered immediately. Grand Counselor Wren's face appeared. Admiral Thornwald, we have a situation. Kira's blood went cold. Sir, Admiral Thorsten Krex is approaching Nexus Prime with 40 ships. He's maintaining radio silence and refuses to acknowledge our hails. We believe he intends to attack the human delegation. For a moment, Kira couldn't process the words. Krex, the hardliner, the military commander who'd opposed the diplomatic meeting from the beginning, who'd argued that humanity should be destroyed before they became more dangerous. He was going to attack during peace talks. He was going to start a war. How long until he arrives? Kira asked, her voice barely steady. 23 minutes. I need to warn Captain Bridger. Already done. She's on her way to your position now. The transmission ended. Kira stood, her mind racing. 40 Imperial warships against 6 human vessels. The humans would be outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded. Standard Imperial doctrine would dictate a quick, overwhelming assault. Disable the enemy before they could react. End the threat decisively. But these weren't standard enemies. These were humans who'd spent 50 years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The door to her quarters opened. Captain Arya Bridger entered, flanked by 2 of her officers. She looked calm, but Kira saw the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness around her eyes. Admiral Thornwald, Arya said, we need to talk about what happens in the next 20 minutes. Captain, I want you to know this action is not authorized by the Council. Krex is acting independently. I know. Arya waved a hand dismissively. Hardliners exist in every society. The question is what you're going to do. You have 3 ships here. Where will they be when the shooting starts? Kira met her gaze. A week ago, the answer would have been simple. Defend the Empire. Protect Imperial interests. Maintain order. But now, after seeing the data Thane collected, after watching Arya negotiate with honesty instead of threats, after realizing that humanity had become something more complex than the simple threat she'd feared. My ships will defend Nexus Prime, Kira said firmly, which means defending everyone inside, including your delegation. Arya studied her face for a long moment. Then she nodded. Thank you, Admiral. That means more than you know. She activated her communication device, speaking rapidly in what Kira assumed was English, the primary human language. Orders, coordinates, tactical instructions. When she finished, she looked at Kira again. My people want to know your intentions. They're preparing for combat operations under Standard Doctrine 7. What does that mean? Kira asked. It means we're going to show Admiral Krex why attacking humans is a bad idea. Admiral Thorsten Krex's fleet dropped out of a hyperspace in perfect Imperial formation. 40 sleek warships arranged in precise battle lines, weapons powered and shields raised. It was an impressive display of Imperial military power, elegant, efficient, overwhelming. Through the viewport of Nexus Prime's command center, Kira watched the formation approach. Beside her, Arya stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Open all communication channels, Kira ordered. Static filled the air. Then, Krex's voice hard and uncompromising. Human vessels, you are guilty of violating Imperial space and threatening galactic security. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Arya's response was immediate and defiant. Admiral Krex, this is Captain Arya Bridger of the Defiant. We are engaged in authorized diplomatic discussions under the protection of the High Council. Any attack on our ships will be considered an act of war against the United Human Space Force. Stand down. The Council's authority is not recognized in matters of existential threats, Krex replied. All dangerous alien species must be eliminated before they become uncontrollable. You had your chance to remain contained. You chose defiance. Now you face the consequences. Arya's voice dropped, becoming colder. Admiral Krex, you're making a mistake. The only mistake was allowing your species to exist this long. Krex's fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced across space, targeting the nearest human ship. The elegant Imperial weapons struck the crude human vessel with devastating force. For a moment, brilliant light obscured the target. Then the light faded, and the human ship was still there. Its thick armor plates glowed hot, radiating absorbed energy. But the hull was intact. Scarred, yes. Damaged, no. The crude, brutal construction that looked so primitive had shrugged off weapons designed to penetrate advanced shielding. Arya spoke quietly into her communicator. A single word, engage. The human response was nothing like Imperial warfare. Instead of elegant energy beams, the 6 human ships opened fire with kinetic weapons. Railguns accelerated its metal slugs to relativistic speeds, sending projectiles screaming across the void. They struck Imperial ships with impacts that registered on seismic sensors. But more disturbing was the human tactics. Instead of maintaining distance and engaging in careful long-range combat, the human ships charged directly into Krex's formation. They rammed damaged enemy vessels. They used their own hulls as weapons when targets got too close. They showed no regard for conventional tactical doctrine. One human ship, badly damaged and venting atmosphere, deliberately crashed into an Imperial cruiser. The resulting explosion destroyed both vessels, but also took out 2 more Imperial ships in the blast radius. They're insane, breathed the sensor operator. No, Arya said quietly. They're human. Kira watched in horrified fascination as the battle unfolded. Imperial ships were designed for elegant, efficient combat between civilized species who followed accepted rules of engagement. They weren't prepared for opponents who treated their own vessels as expendable weapons, who fought with the fury of cornered animals who simply refused to die easily. Krex's 40 ships should have won. By every tactical calculation, they should have overwhelmed the human vessels through sheer numbers and superior firepower. But 18 minutes after the battle began, Krex's fleet was broken. 22 Imperial ships destroyed or disabled. 18 more crippled and retreating. The survivors fled in disorder. Their perfect formation shattered their elegant tactics, useless against an enemy that simply didn't fight fair. The humans had lost 2 vessels. But Kira watched as the survivors of those ships were rescued by their companions, pulled from escape pods and wreckage, brought aboard the remaining ships where medical teams waited. 0 casualties. Despite losing 2 ships, the humans had evacuated everyone before the vessels were destroyed. Krex's flagship limped away, its hull breached in 3 places, its weapons offline, but it wasn't being pursued. The human ships held position around Nexus Prime, their weapons still hot but not firing. They could have destroyed him, could have chased down the retreating fleet and finished them off. They chose not to. Arya opened a communication channel. Her voice was calm, professional, without a trace of triumph. Admiral Krex, your attack has failed. Withdraw your forces immediately. We will not pursue, but we will defend ourselves if you attack again. There was no response from Krex. His ship continued its retreat, disappearing into hyperspace, along with what remained of his fleet. The command center was silent. Everyone stared at the displays, trying to process what they just witnessed. A numerically inferior force defeating a larger, more advanced fleet through tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. Grand Councilor Wren's voice ran through the station speakers. Captain Bridger, the Council deeply regrets this unauthorized attack. Admiral Krex acted against direct orders. This action does not represent imperial policy. Understood, Counselor, Arya replied. But this proves why formal recognition is necessary. Your military just tried to destroy us during diplomatic negotiations. If we hadn't been able to defend ourselves, this meeting would have ended with our deaths. The galaxy needs to know that humans can and will protect themselves. There was a long pause. Then Ren spoke again, their ancient voice carrying weight that transcended politics. The Galactic Empire formally recognizes the United Human Space Force as an independent galactic power. The Soul Accords will be drafted and signed within 72 hours. Welcome to Galactic Civilization, Captain Bridger, officially. Arya closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, Kira saw something there she hadn't expected. Relief. Not triumph. Not pride. Just relief that the fighting was over. Thank you, Counselor, Arya said quietly. We won't disappoint you. The transmission ended. Arya turned to Kira, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. A real smile, tired and genuine. Thank you for defending us, Admiral. You didn't have to do that. Kira looked at the tactical display at the debris cloud, where ships had died at the human vessels that had fought with such determination. Yes, I did. Because you were right. Power with restraint is civilization. You could have destroyed Krex's fleet completely. You chose not to. That's the empire I want to be part of. I'm glad, Arya said, because we're going to need partners for what comes next. The galaxy is bigger than any one species, stronger together than apart. Kira thought about Aldrich, about his last words, about 52 years of believing that aliens were threats to be contained rather than partners to be understood. She'd been wrong. The quarantine hadn't protected the galaxy from humanity. It had protected humanity from the Empire's fear, given them time to become strong enough that when they emerged, they couldn't be dismissed or destroyed. They'd earned their place through patience, through preparation, through the choice to show restraint when they could have shown revenge. Outside the viewport, the human ships began moving back to docking positions, damaged but undefeated, scarred but intact, ugly, crude, and absolutely undeniably effective. Kira watched them and felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The sense that the future might be different than the past, that old wounds might heal if given the chance, that her brother might have been right all along. The Soul Accords were signed 72 hours after the battle in a ceremony that was broadcast across every inhabited world in the Empire. Kira Thornwald stood as witness, her dress uniform pressed and crisp, her expression neutral as the cameras recorded history being made. Grand Counselor Ren and Captain Arya Bridger sat at a simple table, no longer the massive conference chamber, but something smaller, more intimate. The holographic document floated between them, glowing with legal text that would reshape galactic civilization. Article 1. The Galactic Empire recognizes the sovereignty of the United Human Space Force and its 47 colony systems. Article 2 defined territorial boundaries will be established through mutual negotiation with respect for existing settlements and expansion rights. Article 3 trade agreements will be negotiated on equal terms, recognizing the unique capabilities and resources of both parties. Article 4, the United Human Space Force will serve as a protectorate force authorized to respond to threats against any civilization within designated regions. That last article had generated 6 hours of heated debate. Councillor Teth had opposed it violently, arguing that giving humans military authority was insane. But Grand Councillor Ren had been firm. They have the capacity to help, Ren had said. They have the willingness to serve. And they have proven restraint when they could have chosen revenge. That combination is rare. We should not waste it. Now, watching Arya place her hand on the document in formal acceptance, Kira thought about restraint, about the choice the humans had made when Krex attacked. They could have annihilated his fleet, could have pursued the survivors and finished them off, could have made an example that would terrify the galaxy. They chose not to. That choice mattered more than any weapon. The ceremony concluded. Delegates applauded politely. Arya shook Ren's hand in the human custom, a gesture of trust and partnership. Then she turned and caught Kira's eye across the room. They needed to talk. Both of them knew it. They met in one of Nexus Prime's observation lounges, a quiet space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the stars. 2 chairs, a small table, nothing formal. Just 2 officers who'd seen enough of ceremony for one day. Arya arrived first, still wearing her dress uniform, but with the jacket unbuttoned, looking more relaxed than Kira had ever seen her. She was studying the stars through the viewport when Kira entered. "Admiral Thornwald," Arya said without turning. "Thank you for meeting me." "Captain Bridger." Kira took the seat across from her. "You wanted to discuss something, several things." Arya finally turned from the window. Her dark eyes were thoughtful, tired. "First, I wanted to apologize." Kira blinked. "For what?" "For the deception. For 50 years of silence, while we built our civilization in your shadow. I know how it must feel discovering that we were out there all along, growing stronger while you thought we were contained." Arya's voice was sincere. That wasn't meant as disrespect, it was survival. Kira considered this. Part of her wanted to be angry. The Empire had been humiliated, its intelligence proven useless, its containment policy exposed as failure. But another part, the part that had watched humans fight with determination and restraint, understood. "You did what you had to do," Kira said finally. "And you proved something important, that humanity could change. 50 years ago you were violent and chaotic. Now you're organized and disciplined. That's growth." "We had good motivation," Arya said with a slight smile. "Nothing teaches patience like being locked in a cage with no way out except to build your own key. We spent 50 years learning to work together, to plan for the long term, to think beyond our immediate survival." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "But there's something else you should know. Something the Council needs to understand before this partnership goes any further." Kira felt tension creep into her shoulders. "What is it?" Arya activated a small holographic projector. Above the table, an image appeared. A massive structure in space, cylindrical, 30 kilometers long, bristling with arrays and projectors that looked like nothing Kira had ever seen. "This is a Helios-class stellar destabilization platform," Arya said quietly. "We built 7 of them. They're positioned near strategic stars throughout this region of space. Each one can trigger a supernova in approximately 6 hours. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kira stared at the image, her mind racing to calculate the implications. 7 platforms, 7 stars, 7 civilizations that could be wiped out with the push of a button. "How many people?" Kira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "If all 7 were activated, approximately 14 billion sentient beings across multiple species." Arya met her gaze steadily. "We built them 30 years ago when we first broke quarantine and didn't know if the Empire would notice. They were our insurance policy, our guarantee that if you tried to wipe us out, we could make the cost unacceptable." Kira felt sick. 14 billion. The number was incomprehensible. "And you're telling me this now because you need to understand who we are, what we're capable of, and what we choose not to do." Arya gestured to the hologram. "We've had these weapons for 30 years, Admiral. 30 years. We could have used them as blackmail, could have threatened civilizations into giving us what we wanted, could have demanded territory, resources, recognition through fear." She deactivated the hologram. The image of the Helios platform disappeared, leaving only stars visible through the viewport. "We didn't," Arya said. "We kept them secret, kept them inactive, built them as deterrent, not weapon, because we learned something important 50 years ago when we were fighting each other on Earth. We learned that the ability to destroy everything doesn't make you powerful. The wisdom to not destroy everything, that's real power." Kira sat back in her chair, processing this revelation. The Empire had been negotiating with a species that could have held the galaxy hostage, could have demanded anything, and backed it up with the threat of genocide. They chose partnership instead. "The Council will want you to dismantle them," Kira said. "I know, and we won't." Arya's voice was firm, but not aggressive. "Those platforms stay as reminders, as insurance, as proof that we could be monsters and choose not to be. That's a dangerous position, Captain. So is trusting that everyone will always act in good faith. Arya leaned forward. Admiral, we're not naive. We know how politics works. Today the Empire accepts us as partners. Tomorrow, a new council might decide we're threats again. The platforms ensure that any attempt to eliminate us would cost more than anyone's willing to pay. That's not aggression. That's survival. Kira thought about this, about the delicate balance between strength and restraint, about how humanity had walked that line perfectly, building weapons they hoped never to use, showing force only when attacked, offering partnership before anyone asked. Si vis pacem para bellum, Kira said quietly. Arya smiled. You know Latin. I studied Earth history, Rome, the Republic, the Empire, the fall, all of it. Kira met her eyes. If you want peace, prepare for war. It's an old idea. Your species didn't invent it. No, but we learned it the hard way, multiple times. Arya's smile faded. We've destroyed ourselves twice on Earth, Admiral. Nuclear war, environmental collapse. Each time we barely survived. Each time we learned that having weapons and using weapons are different things. Power without wisdom is suicide. She stood walking to the viewport to stare out at the stars again. That's what 50 years of quarantine taught us. Not how to build better ships or bigger guns. How to be patient. How to plan. How to have the capacity for destruction and the discipline not to use it. Kira joined her at the window. Together, they watched the stars in silence for a moment. I'm going to recommend the council accept your terms, Kira said finally. Keep your platforms. Keep your weapons. But know that we'll be watching, and if you ever threaten innocent populations, you'll stop us, Arya finished. I know. That's how it should be. Partners hold each other accountable. That's what makes partnership different from alliance of convenience. Then we understand each other. I think we do. Arya extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. To the future Admiral Thornwald, whatever it brings. Kira took her hand, feeling the firm grip of someone who'd spent a lifetime building things in hostile environments. To the future Captain Bridger, may we both have the wisdom to navigate it. 3 days after the signing ceremony, Kira received an urgent message from the medical wing of Nexus Prime. Admiral Thorsten Krex was awake and requesting to speak with her. She'd been avoiding this conversation. Krex had been unconscious since his flagship limped back to the station, badly injured in the battle he'd started. Part of her had hoped he'd simply remain unconscious until he could be transferred elsewhere. Let someone else deal with the hardliner who'd tried to start a war. But duty was duty, and some conversations couldn't be avoided forever. The medical wing was quiet, the soft hum of life support systems creating a constant background noise. Kira found Krex in a private room, propped up in bed, his scaled features pale but alert. He looked old. Not just physically though, the battle had aged him, but tired in a way that went beyond mere exhaustion. Admiral Thornwald, he said as she entered. His voice was hoarse but clear. Thank you for coming. Kira took the seat beside his bed. Admiral Krex, how are you feeling? Like I was crushed by my own mistakes. He attempted a smile, but it came out more like a grimace, which is appropriate since that's exactly what happened. You disobeyed direct orders from the High Council. You attacked during sanctioned peace negotiations. You started a battle that killed hundreds of your own people. Kira kept her voice neutral. What were you thinking? Krex was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. I was thinking about my family. About the Vraken attack 47 years ago, about watching my wife and children die while I was light years away, unable to help them. Kira felt something twist in her chest. She knew that pain, knew exactly what it felt like to lose family to alien violence. The humans reminded me of the Vraken, Krex continued. Violent, unpredictable, dangerous. I convinced myself that if we didn't stop them now, they'd become another threat. Another species that would kill imperial citizens while we stood by and did nothing. So you decided to stop them yourself? Yes, Krex looked at her directly. And I was wrong, completely catastrophically wrong. What changed your mind? They didn't kill me. The words came out quiet, almost wondering. My flagship was crippled, defenseless. They could have destroyed it easily, could have finished me off and eliminated a vocal opponent. Instead, they held fire. Let us retreat. Even offered medical assistance for my crew. He shook his head slowly. The Vraken would have pressed the attack, would have gloried in the slaughter, but the humans, they won, and then they stopped. They showed restraint when they had every right to show revenge. Kira thought about Arya's words about the choice between destruction and discipline. They're not the same species they were 50 years ago. No, they're not, and I nearly started a war because I couldn't see that. Krex closed his eyes. I need to speak with Captain Bridger, to apologize, to, I don't know, make amends somehow. She's still on the station. I can arrange a meeting. Thank you. Krex opened his eyes again. Kira, may I call you Kira? She nodded. Your brother, Aldrich. He was at Viridian 3, wasn't he? Yes, he died in my arms. I lost my family the same way. Watched the recordings from the colony. Saw them die. Couldn't do anything to help. Krex's voice cracked. I spent 40 years being angry about it. 40 years looking for something to blame someone to hate. The humans were convenient targets. I know the feeling, Kira admitted. I voted for the quarantine, partly because I was afraid. Afraid that if we didn't contain them, they'd become another Vraken. Another species that took people I loved. Were we wrong to be afraid? Kira thought about this carefully. No, fear after trauma is natural. But we were wrong to let fear become policy. To assume that all species who frighten us must be threats. The humans were violent 50 years ago. They could have become monsters. Instead, they became something else, something better. How do we make amends for that? For judging them guilty before they committed any crime? By treating them as partners now. By learning from their restraint. By being better than our fears. Kira stood. I'll arrange the meeting with Captain Bridger, but Krex Bear prepared. She'll probably offer you something you won't expect. What's that? Forgiveness. And maybe a job. The meeting between Krex and Arya happened 2 days later in the same observation lounge where Kira and Arya had talked. Kira attended as witnesses standing near the window while the two former enemies faced each other. Krex looked frail in his medical gown, a far cry from the imposing admiral who'd led 40 ships into battle. Arya looked the same as always, calm, professional, alert. But Kira saw something new in her expression, curiosity maybe, or compassion. Captain Bridger, Krex began his voice formal. I owe you an apology. I attacked your ships during peace negotiations. I killed your people. I started a battle that served no purpose except my own anger. There's no excuse for what I did. Arya listened without interrupting. When Krex finished, she was quiet for a moment. Admiral Krex, she said finally, do you know why we chose not to pursue your fleet? I assumed you wanted to show restraint, to prove you weren't the threat I claimed you were. That's part of it, but there's another reason. Arya leaned forward slightly. We have detailed intelligence on you, Admiral. We know about your family. About Viridian 3, about the Vraken attack. We know you weren't acting from malice. You were acting from grief. Krex looked startled. You know about my family. We spent 50 years studying the Empire. That includes studying its military leadership. We knew attacking you would kill a man who'd already lost everything important to him. That's not victory. That's cruelty. Krex's hands trembled. You spared me out of pity. We spared you because we understand loss. Arya's voice was gentle but firm. Humanity nearly destroyed itself twice, Admiral. We know what grief and anger can do. We know how easy it is to make enemies out of people who remind us of our pain. We've done it. We've paid the price for it. She paused, then continued. So no, we don't need your apology, Admiral Krex. We need your wisdom. You've spent 47 years learning the wrong lessons from tragedy. Now you have a chance to learn the right ones. To take that pain and turn it into something useful. What do you mean? When you're healed, I want you to join the United Human Space Force as a senior tactical advisor. Help us understand Imperial military doctrine. Help us train our officers to work alongside Imperial Fleet units. Help us build a partnership that actually works. Krex stared at her in disbelief. You want me to work for you after I tried to kill you? I want you to work with us, Arya corrected. Because you understand something important. You understand what happens when fear becomes policy, when trauma becomes tactics. You can help us help everyone avoid making those same mistakes. Why would you trust me? Because you admitted you were wrong. That's harder than winning battles, Admiral. Most people never manage it. Arya stood offering her hand. So, what do you say? Will you help us build something better than what we had before? Krex looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Kira watched emotions play across his face. Disbelief, shame, hope, uncertainty. Finally, he reached out and took Arya's hand. Yes, he said quietly. Yes, I will. They shook hands and Kira felt something important happen in that moment. Not just forgiveness, transformation, the conversion of an enemy into an ally. The redemption of someone who'd lost their way and found it again. Later, after Krex had been returned to the medical wing, Arya and Kira stood together at the viewport once more. That was a risk, Kira said. Offering him a position. What if he betrays you? Then we'll deal with it, Arya replied. But I don't think he will. People who admit their mistakes rarely make them twice. And we need voices like his. People who understand the Empire from the inside. Who can help us navigate the politics and culture we're still learning. You're building something, aren't you? Not just a fleet or an alliance, something bigger. We're building a future where species can work together instead of just coexisting, where different approaches to problems are seen as strengths, not threats. Arya smiled. It's ambitious, maybe impossible, but humans are good at attempting impossible things. I hope you succeed, Kira said sincerely. The galaxy needs it. So do we all. The Defiant was decommissioned 2 weeks after the Soul Accords were signed. Kira attended the ceremony, watching as the massive ship that had carried humanity to first contact was officially retired from active service. It would become a museum, Arya explained, a reminder of where humanity had come from and what they'd achieved. The scarred hull plates would remain scarred. The crude welding would stay visible. Everything would be preserved exactly as it was a monument to the principle that you didn't need elegance to accomplish great things. Just determination and the courage to try. She was a good ship, Arya said, standing beside Kira on the observation platform. Built by people who had nothing but hope and stubbornness. She carried us from isolation to partnership. That's worth remembering. What will replace her? Kira asked. Already built. Want to see? They took a shuttle to one of the orbital construction yards near Nexus Prime. What Kira saw there made her stop and stare. The new flagship was enormous, even larger than the Defiant, but its design was different. The hull still showed the characteristic human construction, thick plates, visible welding, robust structure. But incorporated into the design were elements of Imperial architecture. Smooth curves where function allowed, elegant sensor arrays, power systems that combined human fusion reactors with Imperial efficiency improvements. It was a hybrid, a perfect blend of two philosophies of engineering. We're calling her the Aldrich's Promise, Arya said quietly, in honor of Admiral Thornwald's brother, who believed that not all aliens were enemies, who died hoping for a galaxy where different species could understand each other. Kira felt tears prick her eyes. She had mentioned Aldrich once in passing during one of their conversations. The fact that Arya remembered that she'd chosen to honor his memory this way. Thank you, Kira whispered. He would have liked that. The dedication plaque reads, for those who taught us restraint through sacrifice. Arya looked at the ship with obvious pride. She's designed to be crewed by both humans and Imperial personnel. Hybrid stations, mixed command structure, combined training protocols. If this partnership is going to work, we need to actually work together. When does she launch? 3 months. We're still training the joint crew. Arya smiled. Your Lieutenant Locke applied for a position actually. Engineering section. Said he wanted to understand human technology from the inside. Kira laughed. That sounds like Gavin, always curious. They watched the construction for a while longer, seeing workers, human and alien alike, moving across the hull, installing systems, running tests, building something new together. Arya, Kira said after a while, what happens now? The accords are signed. The partnership is official. But what comes next? Now we prove it works, Arya replied. We respond to threats together. We explore together. We build together. And we show the galaxy that different doesn't mean dangerous. That cooperation is stronger than isolation. That's a tall order. Good thing humans are good at tall orders. Arya grinned. Besides, we have help now. Partners who understand that restraint and power aren't opposites. They're complements. She turned to face Kira directly. I need to ask you something. The Council is creating a new position, Commander of Joint Defense Operations. Someone to oversee cooperation between Imperial and human forces. Someone who understands both perspectives. Someone who's proven they can make hard choices for the right reasons. Kira felt her breath catch. You're asking me to take the position? Grand Councilor Wren is asking. I am endorsing. But yes, Arya's expression was serious. You understand what we're trying to build here. You've shown you can put principle over politics. And you have the respect of both sides. There's no one better for this. Kira thought about her life. 35 years at Monitor Station Kepler 7, watching a door that never opened, living with grief and fear and the certainty that she was protecting the galaxy from threats. Now she was being offered something different, the chance to build instead of guard, to create instead of contain, to honor Aldrich's memory by proving he'd been right all along. Yes, she said. I'll do it. Arya's smile was brilliant. Welcome to the future, Admiral Thornwald. Let's make it worth the wait. 10 years later, year 2357, the memorial stood on a moon orbiting Nexus Prime, accessible by shuttle but deliberately isolated. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone 300 meters long carved with names. 40,000 names, the victims of the Vraken attack at Veridian 3 52 years ago. The event that had shaped a generation's understanding of alien threats. The trauma that had led to fear, to containment, to decades of isolation. Now it served a different purpose, a reminder, a lesson, a warning against letting fear become policy. Admiral Kira Thornwald stood before the wall, her hair now completely grey, her uniform bearing the insignia of Commander of Joint Defense Operations. She was 68 years old. Her body ached in ways it hadn't a decade ago. But her mind was sharp, her purpose clear. She'd come to the memorial every year for the past 10 years. Always on the anniversary of Aldrich's death. Always alone until today. Admiral Thornwald. Kira turned. A young woman stood nearby, her uniform identifying her as a lieutenant in the United Human Space Force. She looked nervous but determined. Lieutenant, Kira said. Can I help you? I'm Lieutenant Mara Voss, ma'am. I serve on the Aldrich's Promise. I wanted to... She hesitated. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done, for giving us a chance. Kira smiled gently. I gave you nothing, Lieutenant. Your people earned their place. I just stopped standing in the way. Still, it matters. Mara looked at the wall of names. Is your brother here? Yes. Aldrich Thornwald, Section 7, Row 43. Kira pointed to the spot where his name was carved. He was 25, wanted to be a teacher. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. It was a long time ago, but... Kira touched the stone gently. Some losses never stop hurting. They just become part of who you are. Is that why you helped us? Because you understood loss? Kira considered the question. Partly. But mostly because I realized I'd learned the wrong lesson. I thought loss meant I should be afraid, should build walls, should keep threats contained. Aldrich's last words were about not all aliens being monsters. I ignored that for 50 years. Tried to protect the galaxy through fear instead of understanding. She turned to face the young lieutenant. Your people taught me something important, that having the power to destroy and choosing not to use it, that's real civilization. That's what my brother understood before I did. We're not perfect, Mara said quietly. We still make mistakes, still struggle, still have to choose restraint every day. That's what makes the choice meaningful. Easy choices aren't really choices at all. Kira gestured to the memorial. We remember these people not to fuel anger, but to remind ourselves what anger costs, to choose wisdom over revenge, understanding over fear. They stood together in silence for a moment. Then Mara spoke again. There's a distress call, ma'am. Unknown sector just came through. The promise is being scrambled to respond. Captain Bridger requested you be informed. Kira nodded. Arya was still commanding the flagship, though she'd been promoted to ambassador several times and refused each time. I prefer ship duty, she'd said. Less politics, more actual problem solving. Tell Captain Bridger I'll be there within the hour, and Lieutenant, thank you for coming here, for remembering. Always, ma'am, we don't forget our history, or the people who died so we could learn from it. After Mara left, Kira remained at the memorial a bit longer. She placed her hand on Aldrich's name, feeling the carved letters under her fingertips. 52 years, she whispered. You've been gone 52 years, and I'm finally understanding what you tried to tell me. Not all of them are monsters. Some are just different. And different isn't dangerous, it's opportunity. She smiled through tears that carved paths down her weathered face. Tears not of grief, but of gratitude that Aldrich's dream had finally taken root. We're building what you hoped for, little brother. A galaxy where species work together instead of fearing each other. Where power is measured by restraint instead of destruction. Where your death means something more than just another reason to be afraid. I wish you could see it. The joint crews, the mixed commands. Humans and Imperials and dozens of other species working side by side, building things together, protecting each other. It's messy and complicated and sometimes frustrating. But it's working. She wiped her eyes, straightening her uniform. I have to go. There's a distress call. People need help, and that's what we do now. We help because we can, because we should, because that's what civilization means. One last touch to his name. Then she turned and walked back toward the shuttle pad, her step firm despite her age, her purpose clear despite the years. The briefing room on the Aldrich's Promise was crowded when Kira arrived. Captain Arya Bridger, now 55, her hair showing grey at the temples, stood at the head of the table. Around her sat a mixed crew of humans and various Imperial species, all studying tactical displays and sensor readings. And at the tactical station, wearing the uniform of a senior advisor, sat Admiral Thorsten Krex. Now 75, he'd spent the past 10 years teaching training and helping build the joint defense operations from the ground up. His knowledge of Imperial tactics, combined with his understanding of human determination, had made him invaluable. Admiral Thornwald, Arya said, as Kira entered. Thank you for coming quickly. We have a situation. Kira took her seat. Report. Distress call from the Viridian system. A mining colony under attack by raiders. 20,000 civilians at risk. They're requesting immediate assistance. Viridian, the same system where Aldrich had died 52 years ago. The same colony that had been rebuilt, repopulated, transformed from tragedy to triumph, and now threatened again. Kira felt old anger try to rise in her chest. Then she took a breath, remembering everything she'd learned. Anger was easy. Wisdom was hard, and she'd spent 10 years learning to choose the harder path. What's our response time? She asked calmly. 30 minutes if we push the engines, reported the tactical officer, a human lieutenant named Chen. The colony's defenses are holding, but barely. They need help now. Recommendations. Kira looked at Krex. The old admiral studied the tactical display. Standard raider tactics suggest they're after resources, not conquest. If we arrive with sufficient force, they'll likely withdraw rather than fight. But we should be prepared for combat if they don't. Agreed. Arya turned to her crew. All stations prepare for emergency jump. Weapons to stand by. Shields charged. But remember, we engage only if necessary. Our goal is to protect the colony, not to start a war. What about pursuit if they withdraw? asked one of the Imperial officers. Kira answered before Arya could. We let them go. Our mission is protection, not revenge. We drive them off, secure the colony, and help with recovery. That's the job. Around the table, officer nodded. This was the doctrine they'd spent 10 years building. Protection over aggression, defense over conquest, help over harm. One more thing, Kira added. Viridian holds special significance for many of us. It's where we lost people we loved, but we don't let personal history cloud our judgment. We do this right. We do this clean. We show the galaxy what the Joint Defense Force is capable of. Aye, ma'am, came the chorus of responses. The Aldrich's Promise jumped to hyperspace, carrying its mixed crew toward another crisis. Another chance to prove that the partnership worked. Another opportunity to choose restraint over revenge. Kira watched through the viewport as stars stretched into lines, as space folded around them, carrying them toward a place of old pain and new purpose. Beside her, Arya spoke quietly. Are you all right? I know Viridian is difficult for you. I'm fine, Kira smiled. Actually, I'm better than fine. This is exactly what Aldrich would have wanted. Not revenge for his death, but protection for the living. Not endless grief, but purposeful action. He'd be proud of what you've built. What we've built, Kira corrected. This didn't happen because of one person or one species. It happened because people chose to trust each other, to work together, to see difference as a strength instead of threat. The ship dropped out of hyperspace 30 minutes later. The tactical display showed the situation clearly: 6 raider ships attacking the colony's orbital stations. Defense platforms returning fire but taking damage. Evacuation shuttles launching from the surface, desperate to get civilians to safety. All weapons target the raider ships, Arya ordered. Warning shots first. Give them a chance to withdraw. The Promise's railguns fired, sending projectiles screaming across the void. They struck empty space near the raider vessels, close enough to make the point clear. Stop attacking or face consequences. 5 of the raider ships immediately broke off, jumping to hyperspace without hesitation. They knew the reputation of the Joint Defense Force, knew that fighting was futile, but the 6th ship continued its attack, weapons blazing against the colony's defenses. Stubborn, Krex muttered, or desperate. Tactical disable that ship, Kira ordered. Target engines and weapons, no casualties if possible. The response was surgical. Precision railgun fire took out the raider's engine assembly. EMP bursts disabled its weapons. Within 90 seconds, the ship was drifting powerless but intact. Open a channel, Arya said. The raider captain's face appeared on screen. A species Kira didn't recognize. Features twisted in fear and defiance. You have no authority here. This colony violated trade agreements. We have all the authority we need. Arya interrupted calmly. You attacked civilians. That makes you our problem. You have 2 choices. Surrender peacefully and face justice, or we'll board your ship and take you by force. Choose now. The raider captain looked at something off-screen, probably sensor readings, showing that 20 ships had just jumped into the system. Reinforcements from nearby joint defense stations arriving right on schedule. We surrender, the captain said finally. Good choice. Arya closed the channel. Lieutenant Chen coordinate with the colony. Get medical teams down there. Repair crews to the orbital platforms. And send our engineers to get that raider ship's life support working properly. Can't have prisoners dying from environmental failure. Aye, Captain. The next 6 hours were organized chaos. Medical shuttles ferrying injured to the Promise's sickbay. Engineers working alongside colony technicians to repair damaged systems. Kira herself went down to the colony surface, wanting to see the place where Aldrich had died with her own eyes. It was beautiful. The settlement had grown from the ruins of the attack 52 years ago into a thriving community. Parks and schools, homes and businesses, children playing in streets that had once run with blood. An elderly woman approached Kira as she stood in the central plaza looking at a memorial that listed the names of those who died in the original Vraken attack. Aldrich's name was there along with the others. "Thank you," the woman said simply, "for coming, for helping, for not giving up on us." "We'll always come," Kira replied. "That's what the Joint Defense Force does. We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's not about politics or territory or resources. It's about doing what's right." "Your brother would be proud," the woman said, gesturing to Aldrich's name on the memorial. "I was here during the attack. I was 10 years old. Your brother pulled me from the rubble, saved my life before he—" She couldn't finish. Kira felt her throat tighten. "He was a good man, better than most of us. He told me something before the medics took him away, said to remember that people are worth saving no matter where they come from or what they look like. Said the galaxy needed more helpers and fewer fighters." The woman smiled through tears. "Looks like you remembered that lesson." "Eventually," Kira said quietly. "It took me 50 years, but eventually I understood what he meant." They stood together in silence, watching the colony's children play near the memorial. Playing where people had died, living where there had been only death, building futures where there had been only grief. This was what victory looked like, not destroyed enemies or conquered territory. Just people living their lives in safety, children playing without fear, communities rebuilding and thriving. This was what Aldrich had died for, and this was what Kira had spent the past 10 years fighting to protect. Later that night, back aboard the Promise, Kira found herself in the observation lounge once again. It had become her favorite spot on the ship, quiet, peaceful, perfect for thinking. Arya joined her carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like coffee, but probably wasn't. She handed one to Kira. 37 conflicts resolved in 10 years, Arya said, settling into the chair beside her. Not bad for an experiment that most people thought would fail. Some people still think it will fail, Kira replied. There are those in the Empire who see the Joint Defense Force as a threat, who think we've given humanity too much power. And there are humans who think we've compromised too much, who wanted us to remain independent and aggressive. Arya sipped her drink. Can't please everyone. No, but we can prove them wrong by succeeding. Kira looked at the stars through the viewport. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Krex had succeeded if he destroyed your ships at Nexus Prime? Sometimes. Probably a war that nobody wanted, thousands dead, decades of hostility, the galaxy poorer for the conflict. Arya was quiet for a moment. I'm glad we didn't find out. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Arya spoke again. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. About restraint. About the choice we made not to destroy Krex's fleet. Do you think we were right or were we naive? Kira thought about this carefully. I think you were right, but not because restraint is always the answer. Sometimes you have to fight, have to use force to protect the innocent. The key is knowing when to use power and when to show mercy. That's wisdom. And we were wise. You understood that Krex wasn't evil. He was traumatized, afraid, acting from pain rather than malice. Destroying him wouldn't have solved anything. It would have made him a martyr and turned moderates into hardliners. Kira smiled, showing mercy that changed everything. That proved you were different from the threat he feared. Sometimes I worry we got lucky. That next time, mercy will be the wrong choice. Then we learn, we adapt. We make the best decisions we can with the information we have. Kira set down her cup. Arya, you've built something remarkable here. A partnership that actually works. Species cooperating instead of just coexisting. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because people, human and otherwise, make the choice every single day to do the hard work of understanding each other. You're the one who made it possible. You were the bridge. The person who understood both sides. I was the person who finally stopped being afraid long enough to listen. That's different. Kira stood stretching her aging joints. The next generation will take it further. People like Lieutenant Voss, like your Lieutenant Chen, like all the young officers who've grown up in a galaxy where humans and Imperials work together. To them, this isn't an experiment. It's just normal. That's the dream, isn't it? To make cooperation so normal that people forget it was ever controversial. That's exactly the dream. 6 months later, the ceremony was held on Nexus Prime in the main plaza where the Soul Accords had been signed 10 years earlier. A crowd of thousands had gathered humans, Imperials, and dozens of other species, all here to witness history. Admiral Kira Thornwald stood at attention in her dress uniform, feeling every one of her 68 years. Beside her stood Arya Bridger Thorsten Krex and a dozen other officers who'd spent the past decade building the Joint Defense Force from the ground up. Grand Counselor Wren, now even more ancient than before, moving slowly but with undiminished dignity, approached carrying a simple wooden box. Admiral Thornwald, Wren said, their voice carrying across the plaza through speakers. For 10 years you have served as Commander of Joint Defense Operations. In that time you have resolved 37 conflicts, saved thousands of lives, and proven that cooperation between species is not just possible but powerful. The Galactic Empire and the United Human Space Force wish to honor your service. Renner opened the box, revealing a medal unlike any Kira had seen before. It combined imperial design, elegant curves, precious metals with human aesthetics, practical shape, durable construction, a hybrid like everything else the partnership had created. The Star of Unity, Ren continued, the first of its kind, given to those who bridge divides and build connections where others see only separation, who choose understanding over fear, who prove that strength and wisdom are not opposites but complements. Ren placed the medal around Kira's neck. The weight was significant but comfortable, a reminder of responsibility rather than burden. Thank you, Grand Counselor, Kira said. Her voice was steady, but inside she felt overwhelming emotion. Pride, gratitude, and something else, peace maybe, the sense that she'd finally done what Aldrich had hoped she would do. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Kira found herself surrounded by well-wishers, accepting congratulations, shaking hands, or equivalent gestures for species without hands. It was exhausting and wonderful. Eventually, she managed to slip away to a quiet balcony overlooking the plaza. Arya followed as she always did when Kira needed space. How are you feeling? Arya asked. Old, Kira said with a laugh. Tired, ready to retire and let younger people take over. Don't you dare. We still need you. No, you don't. You need people like Mara Voss, like all the young officers who don't remember when humans and Imperials were enemies. They'll take this further than we ever could. Maybe, but they need examples. Need to see that it's possible to change, to grow, to become better than our fears. Arya leaned against the railing. You're that example, Kira. You show them that 50 years of believing one thing doesn't mean you can't learn something new. I hope so. Kira touched the medal around her neck. I hope Aldrich would think so too. He would, no question. They stood together, watching the crowds below. Humans and aliens mixing freely, talking, laughing, planning the future together. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still moments when null fears tried to resurface. But it was working, slowly, messily, imperfectly, but genuinely working. Arya, Kira said after a while, when I'm gone and that's not a threat, just reality. I'm 68 and I've pushed this body as far as it'll go. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Keep choosing restraint. Keep showing the galaxy that power without wisdom is just violence. Keep building instead of destroying. Keep proving that civilization means making hard choices every single day to be better than our worst impulses. I promise. Arya's voice was solemn. We all promise. This isn't just about you or me or any single person. This is about what we're building together, a legacy that will outlast all of us. Good, Kira smiled. That's all I wanted to hear. Epilogue. 1 year later, year 2358, Admiral Kira Thornwald died peacefully in her sleep at age 69. Her funeral was attended by thousands humans Imperials and representatives from 40 species she'd helped protect during her decade as Commander of Joint Defense Operations. They buried her on the memorial moon near Nexus Prime, not far from the wall, bearing Aldrich's name. Her grave was simple, marked with a stone that read, Kira Thornwald, 2289 to 2358. She learned to build bridges where others saw only walls. Captain Arya Bridger, now serving as the new commander of Joint Defense Operations, stood at the grave long after the ceremony ended. She placed a hand on the cold stone, feeling the weight of the responsibility she'd inherited. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing past your fear, for giving us a chance, for teaching all of us that restraint is strength." She stood straightening her uniform, the same hybrid design that Kira had worn, combining human and imperial elements into something new. Her communicator chimed. A distress call from an outlying system. Pirates attacking a trading convoy. 20 ships requesting immediate assistance. Arya smiled. Some things never changed. There would always be threats, always be crises, always be people who needed help. But now there were also people who would answer, who would come running, weapons ready but minds open, who understood that protecting the innocent was the highest calling, who knew that power meant nothing without the wisdom to use it correctly. She activated her communicator. "This is Commander Bridger to all Joint Defense Units. We have a situation in Sector 7. Prepare for emergency deployment. Standard protocols. Protect first, negotiate second, fight only as last resort. Let's show them what we've learned." As she walked back toward her shuttle, Arya looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, new threats were emerging. New challenges were waiting. New opportunities to prove that cooperation worked better than isolation. The work would never end. But that was fine, because now they had something they'd lacked before. Not just strength, but wisdom. Not just power, but restraint. Not just the ability to destroy, but the discipline to choose not to. That was civilization. That was the legacy Kira Thornwald had died protecting. And that was the future Arya Bridger would spend the rest of her life building. The shuttle lifted off, carrying her back to the Aldrich's promise, back to her crew, back to the work that defined their partnership. Behind her on the memorial moon, two graves stood side by side. Brother and sister separated by 52 years of life, but united in death. Both of them had believed in something important. Both had fought for it in their own ways. Aldrich had believed that not all aliens were monsters. Kira had learned to prove him right, and now a new generation would carry that lesson forward, would build on the foundation they'd laid, would create a galaxy where difference was strength, where restraint was power, where wisdom mattered more than weapons. The stars watched in silence as they always had. They had seen species rise and fall, had witnessed civilizations bloom and wither, had watched as the galaxy turned through endless cycles of conflict and peace. Now they watched something new, the beginning of an era where species worked together, not because they had to, but because they chose to, where former enemies became partners, where restraint proved stronger than revenge, where two civilizations, one elegant and refined, one crude and determined, learned that together they could build something neither could achieve alone. The Warden's watch was over. The builder's work had just begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.